Hi there and welcome. Today we're going to recap the first two episodes of Netflix's animated series Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. The show starts with its awesomely colorful anime opening sequence reminiscent of the original Scott Pilgrim comic series. They managed to get the most out of the original cast from 2010's cult classic Scott Pilgrim vs. the World to do the voice acting for the series too. So let's dive in. Episode 1. In a dream, Scott Pilgrim finds himself in a deserted place, feeling devastatingly alone. Then, out of nowhere, a girl with pink hair and skates appears, telling him to wake up. Abruptly, Scott sits up in the real world, announcing he dreamt of the same girl again. However, his gay roommate Wallace doesn't care at all. Scott continues to daydream about the girl swooning over her cool hair and her skates, but Wallace interrupts him to ask him when he's getting his own place. Apparently, Wallace let him crash one time, and Scott's never left since. He wants Scott to get his own stuff at least, as his freeloading roommate's only possessions are the dirty clothes lying haphazardly on the chair and on the floor. After helping himself to Wallace's coffee, Scott heads out. In Toronto, Scott is a bass player and he practices with his indie garage band Sex Bomb. Stefan Stills leads the band as singer and guitarist, and Kim Pine on drums, frantically watching them from the couch as 17-year-old high schooler Knives Chow, and sitting next to her is young Neil, a close friend of the band members. When they finish playing a song, Knives eagerly praises them as the best band of all time. Kim refuses to believe her, while Stefan hopes that Knives has good taste, but the drummer doubts it. That night, the group of friends meet up and head to Julie's power party. When Neil asks why Scott didn't bring Knives, the bass player insists that she isn't his girlfriend, but also admits that she sorta is. Upon arriving at Julie's house, Scott's friends immediately ditch him, so he grabs a drink and looks around. It's then that he spots someone familiar. It's the girl from his dreams. He approaches her, attempting to start a conversation, but it's super awkward.
Are you real?
Did you just ask me if I was real?
No, I was talking to someone else. Bye.
Scott escapes and bumps into Julie, the party hostess, who's surprised to see him as she personally curates the guest list and thinks Scott sucks. He ignores her dig to ask about the girl from his dreams. Julie tells him that she's Ramona Flowers, a New Yorker who moved to town after a bad breakup and is currently single and works as a DVD delivery person for Netflix. Noticing Scott's interest in Ramona, she expressly forbids him from pursuing her, but he doesn't listen.
I forbid you from dating her, Scott Pilgrim!
Cool, thanks, Julie. Bye.
Back at Wallace's place, Scott wastes no time renting a movie from Netflix and immediately settles on the floor to wait. 3 days later, someone rings the doorbell. It's Ramona. She's delivering his order, and while it's a little awkward, Scott ends up asking her if she's the person from his dreams, saying it's weird. She confirms his suspicion, but gives him an explanation he can't quite understand.
There's just a really convenient subspace highway running through your head. It's like 3 miles in 15 seconds.
Still, Scott asks her out, and she accepts. That night, the two of them meet up at a park, and as snowflakes gently drift around them, Scott and Ramona get to know each other. Unbeknownst to the budding couple, someone is spying on them. This person instructs his butler to bring him Matthew Patel before declaring that the game has just begun. Meanwhile, Scott begins to panic as the snowstorm intensifies, but Ramona takes his hand as they enter the door with a star on it that appears in the middle of the road. On the other side of it is Ramona's apartment. Scott asks if the star door is one of her space subways, which she confirms. Ramona prepares tea and fetches a blanket for Scott, who's shivering. He's too cold to wait for the blanket, so he gets up to look for Ramona. When he finds her, Ramona is in the middle of changing her clothes. One thing leads to another, and the two of them end up kissing and in her bed. However, they didn't do anything else, only settling down to sleep. Meanwhile, Matthew Patel, the first of Ramona's evil ex-boyfriends, convenes with Gideon Graves, the mysterious leader of the League of Evil Exes, who is also the 7th and final ex. The latter informs Matthew about Ramona's latest romantic interest and reveals that Scott is currently sleeping in her bed. Matthew is outraged but is stunned speechless when Gideon tells him that Scott is also dating a high schooler and Ramona doesn't know. Matthew is raring to fight the new guy, determined to finish him. When morning comes, Scott invites Ramona to see his band that night at the Rocket. After she promises to show up, a thrilled Scott walks back to Wallace's with an extra sparkle in his step. He happily updates Wallace, who offers him lukewarm congratulations, emphasizing the need for Scott to end things with Knives immediately. Scott reluctantly agrees, and Wallace informs him that he has the letter. It's from Matthew Patel, who writes about wanting to fight him, but Scott doesn't take it seriously, tossing the letter away. At the Rocket, Knives is super excited about Sex Bomb's upcoming performance. Wallace introduces her to Stacy, Scott's younger sister. Knives is super stoked and happy, which tells Wallace that Scott hadn't broken up with her yet. Just then, she spots Scott, who instantly is nervous since he also sees Ramona coming. In a panic, he runs away to Knives' confusion. In the dressing room, a stressed Scott discovers that the opening band didn't show up. Stefan, who's quite anxious, proposes canceling the show, but Scott inspires his bandmates to keep the show going. Sex Bomb starts with their performance, and they're rocking out on stage when an explosion interrupts them. Matthew appears and immediately attacks, but Scott counters and even lands a hit. He had no idea who Matthew is and why he's attacking. He forgot all about the letter. In a comical turn, Ramona's first evil ex-boyfriend is exasperated. Having spent much effort getting the letter to Scott in the snowstorm, he reintroduces himself, revealing the League of Evil X's purpose.
Ramona Flowers has 7 evil exes, each more powerful than the last, all of whom you must defeat in order to date her.
When Scott checks with Ramona, she tells him she dated Matthew briefly in middle school. The two guys then have a video game style duel. And initially, they're evenly matched. However, after a magical punch from Matthew, Scott disappears and a few coins are left in his place as Ramona sadly looks on. Episode 2. Declaring himself the winner, Matthew thinks he and Ramona get back together, but the woman simply leaves the rocket along with the rest of the crowd. Knives, who has fainted earlier, wakes up in the near-empty club. To her horror, she finds out from the janitor that Scott was punched to death. Days later, a gloomy Ramona dyes her hair half blue, and also attends Scott's funeral where everyone is dealing with his death in their own ways. Knives is distraught as she lashes out at Ramona, blaming her for causing Scott's death.
What are you doing here? You killed Scott Pilgrim!
Everyone starts gossiping, saying things couldn't get even more dramatic. Or could it? The church doors swing open to reveal Envy Adams, the famed lead singer of The Clash at Demon Head, and Scott's ex, making a grand entrance. Knives is shocked, and the mourners start to cheer for Envy. The celebrity reveals that she briefly dated Scott before singing a song in his memory, a performance that escalates into a concert-style spectacle. The mourners are touched while Ramona is stunned that Scott dated such a popular singer. Meanwhile, certain individuals in different locations receive discreet numbered black envelopes. And among those envelopes is Gideon, who is surprised to be invited to his own secret lair. Back at the church, the funeral attendees chase after Envy as she leaves. Now alone, Ramona approaches Scott's casket, which only has a few coins inside.
I'm sorry, Scott.
In New York City, Lucas Lee, a renowned Hollywood legend and the second of Ramona's notorious evil ex-boyfriends, strides confidently into the secret headquarters of the League of Evil Exes, aka Gideon's lair. He encounters Todd Ingram, Evil Ex number 3, who's also a vegan rock star. The fourth Evil Ex, half ninja Roxy Richter, is also already waiting at the meeting. With everyone present except for Evil Ex number 1, Todd asks Gideon why he gathered everyone, but the leader reveals he didn't. Matthew then enters, announcing that it was he who invited them all. He destroys the robot brought by Ken and Kyle, Evil Ex's number 5 and number 6, upsetting the two. Matthew brings their attention to a fatal flaw in their league, a failure in leadership. He's questioning Gideon's ways since he got nothing for defeating Scott. Matthew is particularly frustrated that despite his flawless triumph, Ramona still rejected him. Gideon scoffs, revealing that Matthew was never meant to get Ramona back. He had planned to get the girl for himself in the end. The revelation upsets the others, and Matthew declares that it's time that there's a new Evil Ex in charge. He challenges Gideon in a winner-take-all duel. The battle gets heated as the others watch, especially when Matthew brings out his demon hipster girls to assist him in his battle. The fight intensifies when Gideon brings them to the lower floor, procuring weapons and destroying the spectacle girls. They move to the roof, and for a moment it looks like Matthew's losing, but he turns the tables on Gideon. Now hanging off the side of the building, the CEO is forced to sign away everything to Matthew.
What's this?
The result of this fight is legally binding. Everything of yours now belongs to Mr. Patel.
Hey! My empire? My home? My underwear?
Those were the terms.
The new leader decides not to kill Gideon, reveling in his win while Gideon, now stripped of everything, feels utterly betrayed by the other exes. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Ramona fondly recalls her memories of Scott. When she goes to sleep, she enters her space subway and hears a familiar voice calling for her. Ramona jolts awake and sits up in bed, realizing Scott is still alive. So what do you think of these first episodes for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off? Leave it in the comments. And if you enjoyed the recap, please like and subscribe for more. See you next time.